How does a man walk away from his daughter's house knowing her life is already collapsing, without saying a word? I drove 6 hours through a storm carrying $80,000 in gifts, only to freeze at the door when I heard my son-in-law wish I would never make it back. A month later, nothing remained of their perfect life, and they never understood why. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe, hit the hype button, and support this channel with a like. And tell us below. Have you ever faced something like this? The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the highway into a river of white noise and brake lights. I'd been driving for 4 hours straight, no stops, just coffee in the cup holder, and the windshield wipers beating a rhythm that felt like a countdown. The back seat was loaded, custom jewelry box, antique books, framed photographs I'd restored myself, and a cashier's check folded inside a birthday card. $80,000, give or take. Everything I'd saved for Elara's 27th birthday. I'm an archaeologist. I spend my days in dirt and silence, cataloging bones and pottery shards for universities that barely remember my name. People see the title and imagine Indiana Jones. What they get is a 52-year-old man in reading glasses who drives a 15-year-old sedan and eats lunch alone in his office. I'm not flashy. Never have been. But I'm careful. I plan. I save. And I've always believed that quiet work deserves quiet rewards. Elara used to understand that. When she was younger, she'd sit on the floor of my study while I labeled artifacts, asking questions about ancient trade routes and forgotten civilizations. She had a mind for patterns, for seeing what was buried beneath the surface. But somewhere along the way, she stopped asking questions. She met Calvin, and everything changed. Calvin Holt, 33 years old, real estate speculator. He wore tailored suits and drove a leased luxury car, and he had a way of filling a room with his voice. He was the kind of man who called everyone buddy and never remembered your name. The kind who shook your hand too hard and looked past you while doing it. I didn't like him from the start, but Elara was radiant around him, and I told myself that was enough. The storm got worse as I crossed into the coastal county. Wind rocked the car, and twice I had to slow to 20 miles an hour just to see the road. But I kept going. I'd promised Elara I'd be there. She'd sounded distant on the phone when I called to confirm, distracted, but she'd said yes. Come, we'd love to see you. We, not I, we. I reached their neighborhood just after 10. The houses were new, expensive, identical, white siding and manicured lawns and security cameras on every corner. Calvin had bought the place 2 years ago, right after the wedding. He'd told me it was an investment. Prime location, he'd said. Gonna triple in value in 5 years. I'd nodded and smiled and written a check to help with the down payment, $25,000. He'd never said thank you. I parked on the street, not in the driveway. I didn't want to block them in. The rain was lighter now, just a drizzle, and the neighborhood was silent except for the hum of streetlights. I hauled the gifts out of the back seat, balancing the boxes in my arms, and walked up the driveway toward the front porch. That's when I heard it. The door was cracked open, just an inch, enough to let the sound spill out. Calvin's voice, loud and loose. I'm just saying, man, when the old guy finally goes, we're set. House is paid off, no mortgage, right on the water, and he's got like no other family. It all comes to us. I froze. My hands went numb around the boxes. Someone else laughed. One of Calvin's friends, probably. You're cold, bro. Cold? I'm realistic. Dude's, what, 52? Drives like 6 hours in a storm to bring us stuff we don't even need. It's pathetic, honestly. But hey, when he's gone, we cash out. Easy retirement. Then I heard it. Elara's voice, not angry, not defensive, laughing. Calvin, stop, she said, but she was giggling. That's so bad. You know I'm right, babe. I know, but still. I stood there for 10 seconds, maybe 15. The rain dripped off the edge of the porch roof, tapping against the boxes in my arms. My daughter, my only child, was laughing at the idea of my demise like it was a punchline at a dinner party. I turned around, walked back to the car, set the boxes in the back seat, closed the door quietly, and drove away. Nobody saw me. Nobody knew I'd been there, and that was exactly how I wanted it. It took me 3 hours to get home. I didn't stop, didn't eat, didn't even turn on the radio. I just drove, and my mind replayed that conversation on an endless loop. Every word, every laugh, every pause. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the rain had stopped, and the sky was starting to lighten in the east. I sat in the car for a while, staring at my house, a small, single-story ranch on 2 acres of wooded land. I'd bought it 20 years ago with money I'd saved from fieldwork in Central America. Paid it off in full within a decade. No mortgage, no debt. Just mine. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Books stacked on the coffee table, artifacts lining the shelves, a framed photograph of Elara at age 8, holding a pottery shard I'd let her keep from a dig site. She'd been so careful with it, wrapping it in tissue paper and keeping it in a shoebox under her bed. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was something else. Hollow, maybe. Like I'd spent years building something fragile and intricate, only to watch someone knock it over without noticing. But as the sun came up, the hollowness started to harden into something sharper. I thought about the money I'd given them, the down payment on the house, the car loan I'd co-signed when Calvin's credit didn't clear, the wedding, $30,000, paid in full because Elara had wanted something special. I'd never asked for repayment, never expected it. I'd told myself it was what fathers did, but it wasn't just the money, it was the time. The calls I'd made to check in, only to be met with one-word answers and hurried goodbyes. The birthdays I'd celebrated alone because they were too busy to visit. The holidays where I drove to them, always, because they never came to me. And through it all, I'd told myself it was fine, that this was normal, that Elara was building her own life and I needed to give her space. But I'd been wrong. They hadn't needed space. They'd needed distance. Distance from the quiet, boring archaeologist who didn't fit into their shiny, leveraged life. Distance from the man whose existence was only valuable when it ended. I opened my laptop and pulled up a file I hadn't looked at in years. Estate planning documents, trust structures, property deeds. I'd set everything up a decade ago with Marcus Halden, an attorney I'd worked with on a university land acquisition. Marcus was methodical, unemotional, and ruthlessly precise. He didn't do feelings, he did paperwork, and right now that was exactly what I needed. I scrolled through the documents, reading clauses I'd half forgotten, beneficiary designations, contingency plans, revocable trusts. Everything was clean, organized, and, most importantly, flexible. I picked up my phone and dialed Marcus's office. It was 6 a.m, but I knew he'd be there. He always was. "Lennon," he said when he answered. No greeting. Just my name. "I need to make some changes," I said. "To what?" "Everything." There was a pause. Then, "Come in today, 9 o'clock. I'll be there." I spent the rest of the morning going through my files, bank statements, investment portfolios, property records, insurance policies. I wanted to know exactly what I had, down to the last dollar, before I walked into Marcus's office. The numbers surprised me. I'd always been careful with money, but I hadn't realized just how much had accumulated over the years. Between my salary, consulting fees, and investments, I had just over $600,000 in liquid assets. The house was worth another $350,000. Add in the life insurance policy, $200,000, and it was more than $1 million. More than enough to matter. More than enough to hurt. Marcus's office was downtown, in a building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Marble floors, high ceilings, and a receptionist who smiled without warmth. I'd been here a dozen times over the years, always for routine updates or minor adjustments. This time felt different. Marcus met me in the lobby and led me back to his office, a corner room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a desk that could double as a dining table. He was 61, thin and gray-haired, with the kind of face that never gave anything away. He gestured to a chair, and I sat. "Walk me through it," he said, pulling a legal pad from a drawer. I told him everything: the drive, the door, the conversation, Elara's laugh. I kept my voice even, factual, like I was describing a dig site. Marcus didn't interrupt. He just wrote, his pen moving in quick, precise strokes. When I finished, he looked up. "You want to disinherit her?" "No," I said. "I want to restructure." "Restructure how?" "I want to make sure that if something happens to me, the assets go where I choose, not where they assume." Marcus leaned back in his chair, tapping the pen against the pad. "Your current setup has Elara as the primary beneficiary on everything. The house, the accounts, the life insurance. You want to change that." "I want to create conditions," I said. "Safeguards." "Such as?" "A trust, one that doesn't activate unless specific criteria are met. And if those criteria aren't met, the assets go elsewhere." "Where?" "Scholarship funds, archaeological grants, anywhere but them." Marcus studied me for a long moment. "This is legal, but it's not subtle. If they ever find out—" "They won't," I said. "Not until it's too late." He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll draft the amendments. But I need something from you first." "What?" "Clarity. You're not doing this out of anger. You're doing it because you've made a calculated decision. Correct?" I thought about that. About the 6-hour drive, the rain, the sound of Elara's laugh. "Correct," I said. "Good. Because anger fades. Decisions don't." We spent the next 2 hours going through the details. Marcus explained the legal structures: revocable trusts, contingent beneficiaries, conditional clauses. He showed me how to build a system that would hold up in court, one that didn't leave room for challenges or loopholes. The key, he said, was conditionality. Instead of simply removing Elara as a beneficiary, we'd create a trust that required her to meet specific criteria: regular communication, demonstrated care, financial independence, things that should have been natural but clearly weren't. If she met those conditions at the time of my passing, she'd inherit. If she didn't, the assets would transfer to a scholarship fund I'd establish for archaeology students, kids who actually cared about the work, not just the payout. "What about the house?" I asked. "Irrevocable land trust," Marcus said. "You transfer the property into a trust that can't be sold or mortgaged without the approval of a designated administrator, and that administrator isn't Elara." "Who is it?" "Me, or another attorney you designate. The point is, they can't touch it." I nodded. "Do it." Marcus made more notes, flipping through pages of legal code and precedent. "I'll have the paperwork ready by the end of the week. You'll need to come back to sign everything in front of a notary, and once it's done, it's done. You understand that?" "I understand." "And you're sure?" I looked out the window at the city below, cars and buildings and people moving through their lives, all of them convinced they had time. "I'm sure," I said. By the time I left Marcus's office, it was nearly noon. I drove to the university, parked in my usual spot, and walked across campus to the archaeology building. It was a Tuesday, which meant the hallways were mostly empty except for a few students huddled over laptops in the common area. My office was on the 3rd floor, a small room with a window that overlooked the quad. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar smell of old paper and dust. This was my space, the one place where I'd always felt like I belonged. I sat at my desk and pulled out a notebook, one I'd been keeping for the past 5 years, documenting every interaction with Elara and Calvin, every phone call, every visit, every gift. I'd started it as a way to remember the good moments, but now it read like evidence. December 2020, sent $5,000 for holiday expenses, no acknowledgement. March 2021, Drove 4 hours to help them move. Calvin didn't offer gas money. June 2021, co-signed car loan. Never received a thank you card. November 2022, paid for wedding in full. Elara cried and said I was the best father in the world. January 2023, called to check in. Elara said she was busy and would call back. She didn't. The list went on. Page after page of small rejections, tiny cruelties, moments where I'd been treated like an inconvenience rather than a person. I'd told myself it didn't matter, that this was just how families worked now. Busy, distracted, disconnected. But looking at it all written down, I realized I'd been lying to myself. This wasn't normal. This was neglect. And I'd enabled it by never saying a word. But I was done being silent. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved quietly. I met with Nora Feld, my relationship manager at the bank where I'd kept accounts for over 20 years. Nora was efficient, professional, and discreet. She didn't ask questions when I requested a full review of my assets, savings accounts, investment portfolios, retirement funds. She just compiled the information and handed it over in a sealed folder. The numbers were higher than I'd expected. Decades of careful saving, combined with steady university contracts and consulting fees, had built something substantial. Not wealthy by Calvin's standards, but enough to matter. I also revisited the property deed for my house. It was in my name alone, had been since the divorce when Elara was 6. No liens, no co-signers, just me. Marcus had already begun drafting the trust amendments, but I wanted to understand every detail before I signed anything. In the meantime, I watched. I didn't call Elara, didn't text, didn't reach out. I waited to see if she would notice my absence. 3 days passed, then a week, then 2. Finally, on day 16, my phone buzzed. A text from Elara. "Hey, Dad, you still coming for my birthday? Let me know." I stared at the message for a long time. She didn't ask where I'd been, didn't mention the storm or the drive or the fact that I'd never shown up. Just a casual check-in, like I was an afterthought. I typed back, "Sorry, got held up with work. I'll send something." Her response came 30 seconds later. "Okay, cool. Thanks." That was it. No disappointment. No concern. Just, okay. I set the phone down and returned to the documents spread across my kitchen table. Marcus had sent over the first draft of the trust amendments, and I read through every page, every clause, every condition. It was perfect. Airtight. And once I signed it, everything would change. But I didn't sign. Not yet. I wanted to give them one more chance, one more opportunity to prove that I'd misunderstood, that the conversation I'd overheard was just a bad joke taken too far. So I waited, and I watched, and I learned. I started paying attention to their social media, something I'd rarely done before. Elara posted constantly, pictures of brunches and beach walks and shopping trips. Calvin was always in the background, smiling, his arm around her shoulders. They looked happy, perfect even. But I noticed something else. The captions, the hashtags, the lifestyle they were projecting. It was expensive, too expensive for what they actually earned. Elara worked in marketing for a small firm. Good job, decent salary, but nothing extravagant. Calvin's real estate ventures were supposed to be lucrative, but I'd never seen any evidence of actual profit. Just purchases, just acquisitions, just debt. I did some digging, called a few people I knew in the industry, found out that Calvin had bought 3 rental properties in the past 18 months, all of them leveraged to the hilt. He was betting on appreciation, on the market continuing to climb. But the market was softening. Interest rates were rising. And if he couldn't refinance or sell before his adjustable rate loans reset, he'd be underwater. Unless, of course, he had a backup plan. I thought about that as I sat in my car outside their neighborhood one evening, watching their house from a distance. Calvin came home late, parked his leased BMW in the driveway, and walked inside with his phone pressed to his ear. He looked stressed, tired, worried. Good. 3 weeks after the night at the door, I drove back to Marcus's office. He'd called that morning to say the final documents were ready. "Everything's in order," he said when I arrived. "I just need your signatures." We went through the paperwork, page by page, the trust amendments, the beneficiary changes, the property deed transfer into the irrevocable land trust. Marcus explained each section, pointing out the clauses that mattered, the language that made it unbreakable. "Once you sign this," he said, "Elara is no longer the automatic beneficiary. She'll have to meet the conditions outlined in the trust: regular communication, demonstrated familial engagement, financial independence, or the assets bypass her entirely." "And the house?" "Protected. It's in the land trust now. Can't be sold, mortgaged, or transferred without approval from the trust administrator. Even if they try to challenge it in court, they'll lose. I've made sure of it." I picked up the pen. "You're certain?" Marcus asked. I thought about the door, the rain, the laugh. I signed. Marcus notarized each document, his stamp pressing into the paper with a heavy thunk. When we finished, he gathered everything into a folder and locked it in his safe. "What now?" I asked. "Now we wait. The trust is active. The property is protected. If something happens to you, the system kicks in automatically. If nothing happens, you can always revoke it later." "I won't." Marcus studied me. "You've changed, Lennon." "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending." I left his office feeling lighter, not happy, not relieved, just clear. Like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize was there, and now it was gone. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted them to know what they'd lost, not now, not while I could still reverse it, but soon, when it was too late to fix, when they'd realize that the man they'd dismissed as pathetic and boring had outmaneuvered them completely. So I scheduled a meeting. A family estate planning session, I called it. Something official. Something that would make them feel important. Marcus agreed to host it. "When?" he asked. "1 month from the night I heard them," I said. "Exactly. Why then?" "Because I want them to remember." Marcus nodded. "I'll send the invitations." The days leading up to the meeting were strange. I felt calm, focused. I went about my work as usual, cataloging a new shipment of ceramic fragments, teaching a seminar on stratigraphic analysis, answering emails from graduate students. But underneath it all, there was a hum of anticipation, like standing on the edge of a cliff and knowing exactly when you're going to jump. I didn't contact Elara, didn't check her social media, didn't think about her at all, really. I just waited. And then, 3 days before the meeting, my phone rang. It was Jonah Pierce, the contractor I'd worked with on university projects. We hadn't spoken in months. "Lennon," he said, "got a question for you." "Shoot. You know a guy named Calvin Holt?" My hand tightened on the phone. "I do. Why?" "He owes me $12,000 for a renovation job I did on one of his rental properties. Contract says payment on completion, but it's been 6 weeks and I haven't seen a dime. I'm about to file a lien." "Do it," I said. Jonah laughed. "That's cold, man. But yeah, I'm done waiting. Just wanted to make sure he wasn't like a friend of yours or something." "He's not." "Good, because between you and me, the guy's a mess. I've worked on 2 of his properties, and both times he's been late on payments. Word is he's overextended. Way overextended." "How bad?" "Bad enough that if the market dips another 5%, he's done." I thanked Jonah and hung up. Then I sat there, staring at the wall, thinking about Calvin, about the leased car and the tailored suits and the confidence that came from borrowing against a future he didn't actually have. And I smiled. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday. I arrived early, at 1:30, and waited in Marcus's office. He handed me a folder with copies of everything: trust documents, beneficiary forms, property deed amendments, financial summaries. I flipped through them, checking each page, each signature line. "They don't know," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "No." And you're not going to tell them before we start? No, he nodded. Then let's get this over with. The receptionist called back at 2. They're here. Marcus led me to the conference room, a large space with a mahogany table and leather chairs. The walls were lined with law books, and the windows overlooked the city. It felt formal, official. Exactly the right setting. Elara and Calvin arrived together. She was wearing a sundress and sandals, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Calvin had on jeans and a button-down shirt, his sleeves rolled up like he'd just come from something important. "Hey, Dad," Elara said, giving me a quick hug. She smelled like expensive perfume, something floral and sharp. Calvin shook my hand, grinning. "Lennon, good to see you, man. What's this all about?" "Marcus will explain," I said, gesturing to the table. We all sat. Marcus at the head, me to his right, Elara and Calvin across from us. The room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioning and the faint sound of traffic outside. Marcus opened a folder and pulled out a set of documents. He didn't smile. He didn't make small talk. He just started. "Thank you both for coming," he said. "We're here today to review Lennon's estate planning structure and make sure everyone understands the current arrangements." Calvin leaned back in his chair, relaxed. Sure, makes sense." Elara glanced at me. "Is everything okay, Dad?" "Everything's fine," I said. Marcus continued. "Lennon has recently made some updates to his estate plan. Specifically, he's restructured his assets into a revocable trust with conditional beneficiary designations." Calvin frowned. "Conditional?" "Correct. The trust includes specific criteria that must be met in order for the primary beneficiary to receive the assets. If those criteria are not met, the assets are redirected to secondary beneficiaries." Elara's smile faltered. "What kind of criteria?" Marcus slid a document across the table. "It's outlined here, but in summary, the primary beneficiary must demonstrate financial independence and a history of reciprocal familial engagement over a sustained period. If these conditions are not satisfied at the time of Lennon's passing, the assets transfer to a scholarship fund for archaeology students." The room went silent. Calvin picked up the document, scanning it quickly. His face changed, confusion first, then irritation. "Wait, what does reciprocal familial engagement mean?" "It means consistent mutual communication and support," Marcus said. "Regular visits, phone calls, demonstrated care, the kind of relationship that goes both ways." Calvin's jaw tightened. "And if that's not documented, then the trust bypasses the primary beneficiary entirely." Elara looked at me, her eyes wide. "Dad, what is this?" "It's a safeguard," I said, "to make sure my assets go to someone who values more than just the payout." Calvin slammed the document down on the table. "This is ridiculous. You're putting conditions on your own daughter? What, because we've been busy?" "Busy?" I repeated. "Is that what you call it?" "Yeah. We have lives, Lennon. Jobs, responsibilities. We can't drop everything every time you want to see us." "I never asked you to." "Then what's this about?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him, at his expensive watch, his tailored shirt, his least confidence. And I saw exactly what he was. A man who'd built his life on borrowed money and borrowed time, waiting for a windfall that was never coming. Elara's voice cracked. "Dad, please, this isn't fair." "Fair," I said. "You want to talk about fair?" Marcus cleared his throat, pulling the attention back to the table. "There's more." He slid another document across. This one was thicker, bound with a blue cover. "What's that?" Calvin asked, his voice tight. "Property deed protections," Marcus said. "Lennon's house and the 2 acres it sits on are now held in an irrevocable land trust. The property cannot be sold, transferred, or mortgaged without the approval of the trust administrator, which is not Elara." Calvin's face went pale. "You're kidding." "I'm not. That house is worth—" I know what it's worth, I said, and it's not yours. Elara's hands were shaking. Dad, why are you doing this? I looked at her, really looked at her. My daughter, the girl who used to sit on the floor of my study asking questions about ancient worlds, the woman who'd laughed at the idea of me being gone. Because I heard you, I said quietly. Her face went blank. Heard me? When? A month ago, at your house. I drove 6 hours through a storm to bring you birthday gifts, $80,000 worth. I got to your door, and I heard Calvin talking about how convenient it would be when I wasn't around anymore. And I heard you laugh. The color drained from her face. Calvin opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time since I'd met him, he had nothing to say. I stood there, I continued, with those gifts in my arms, and I listened to you plan my estate like I was already gone. And then I left. And I waited. For 16 days I waited to see if you'd notice I never came in. If you'd call. If you'd ask if I was okay. Elara's voice was barely a whisper. Dad! You texted me on day 16, not to check on me, not to apologize, just to ask if I was still coming, like I was a delivery service. Tears started rolling down her cheeks, but I didn't stop. I gave you everything. I paid for your wedding, I co-signed your loans, I helped with your house, and I never asked for anything in return except respect, and you couldn't even give me that. Calvin stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. You can't just… I already did, I said. Marcus tapped the documents on the table. Everything is filed and notarized. The trust is active. The property protections are in place. This isn't a threat. It's done. Calvin's face twisted with rage. You think you're so smart? You think you can just cut us out? I didn't cut you out, I said. I gave you conditions. The same conditions any reasonable person would expect in a relationship. And you can't meet them because you never cared enough to try. We care. No, you don't. You care about what I can give you. That's not the same thing. Elara was sobbing now, her face in her hands. Dad, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. We didn't mean it. Yes, you did, I said. And that's why this is necessary. Marcus pulled out another document. There's one more thing you should know. Calvin's eyes narrowed. What? The life insurance policy, $200,000. Lennon has removed Elara as the beneficiary. The payout now goes to the scholarship fund as well. Calvin's face went from pale to red. You're screwing us over because of one stupid comment? No, I said. I'm protecting myself from people who see me as a bank account instead of a person. He pointed at me, his hand shaking. This is elder manipulation, financial abuse. We'll sue. Marcus smiled for the first time. You're welcome to try. But I should mention that Lennon is 52 years old, in perfect health, and of sound mind. This isn't elder abuse. It's informed decision-making. And if you challenge it in court, I'll bury you in legal fees before you ever see a judge. Calvin looked like he wanted to flip the table. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door. Calvin, wait! Elara started, but he was already gone. She turned back to me, her face streaked with tears. Dad, please, don't do this. I'll fix it. We'll fix it. There's nothing to fix, I said. You made your choice. I'm just making mine. But I love you. Do you? She flinched like I'd struck her. I stood up, gathering my copies of the documents. If you want to prove that, Elara, then prove it. Be present. Be engaged. Be the daughter I raised instead of the one Calvin turned you into. And maybe in a few years we'll revisit this. A few years? Or never. It's up to you. I walked past her, past Marcus, and out the door. The parking lot was bright and hot, the asphalt shimmering in the afternoon sun. I got into my car, started the engine, and sat there for a moment, letting the air conditioning wash over me. My phone buzzed. A text from Elara. Dad, please call me. We need to talk. I deleted it. Another buzz. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Please. I deleted that one too. I drove home slowly, taking the long route through town. Past the university, where I'd spent decades teaching students who'd forget my name within a year. Past the coffee shop, where I used to meet colleagues who'd stopped calling. Past the library where Elara and I used to go on Saturday mornings, back when she still asked questions. When I got home, the house was exactly as I'd left it. Quiet, clean, mine. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking at the framed photograph of Elara at age 8. She was smiling in the picture, holding that pottery shard like it was the most important thing in the world. I wondered when she'd stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a resource. I wondered if she even knew the difference. But it didn't matter anymore. The plan was done. The safeguards were in place, and for the first time in a month, I felt like I could breathe. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. Hello? Mr. Roard? This is Jonah Pierce. Just wanted to let you know I filed that lien against Calvin Holt this morning. Thought you'd want to hear. Thanks, Jonah. No problem. And hey, if you ever need work done, you know where to find me. You're one of the good ones. I hung up and smiled. The next few days were quiet. I went back to work, back to my routine. I cataloged artifacts, answered emails, taught my classes. Nobody at the university knew what had happened. Nobody asked, and I liked it that way. Elara kept texting. At first, it was every few hours, then every day, then every other day. The messages got longer, more desperate. Apologies, explanations, promises. I didn't respond to any of them. Calvin never reached out. Not once. And that told me everything I needed to know. A week after the meeting, Marcus called. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Calvin tried to contest the trust, filed a motion claiming undue influence. And? Judge threw it out. Didn't even make it to a hearing. I told you it was airtight. Good. There's more. He's in trouble. The lien Jonah filed triggered a review by one of his lenders. They're calling his loans. He's got 30 days to refinance or they foreclose. Will he make it? Not a chance. The market's down, his credit's shot, and he's already missed 2 payments on the rental properties. He's done. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. What about Elara? She'll be fine. Her name's not on any of his debts. She'll walk away clean. Will she walk away from him? Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's not my area, Lennon. I know. 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Elara's handwriting. I almost didn't open it. Almost threw it away without reading. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short. Dad, I know you probably won't read this. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did. What we did. And I'm sorry. Calvin and I are separating. It's been coming for a while, but the meeting with Marcus made me see what I couldn't before. He never cared about me. He cared about what I could give him. Just like I never cared about you. I cared about what you could give me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to respond. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. Trying to be the person you raised me to be. I love you, Dad, even if I didn't show it. Elara. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it up and put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday I'd give her another chance. But not today. 3 months after the meeting, I was sitting in my office at the university when my phone rang. It was Marcus. You need to come down here, he said. Why? Calvin's in my lobby. He wants to talk to you. Tell him no. I did. He's not leaving. I sighed. I'll be there in 20 minutes. When I arrived, Calvin was sitting in one of the leather chairs in the waiting area. He looked like he'd aged 10 years. His hair was longer, unkempt. His clothes were wrinkled. The expensive watch was gone. He stood when he saw me. Lennon, thanks for coming. I didn't come for you, I said. I came because Marcus asked me to. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Conference room now. We followed him inside. The same room where we'd had the meeting 3 months ago. The same table, the same chairs. Calvin sat down heavily. I know you hate me. I don't hate you, I said. I just don't think about you. He flinched. Fair enough. Why are you here, Calvin? He took a deep breath. I'm bankrupt. Lost everything. The house, the cars, the rental properties, all of it. And Elara left me. I know. You know? I know everything. It's what I do. I dig, I uncover, I learn. He laughed bitterly. Of course you do. So again, why are you here? I wanted to apologize. I stared at him. For what? For everything. For treating you like garbage. For what I said that night. For making Elara think it was okay to ignore you. For all of it. And you think an apology fixes it? No. But I wanted you to know that I get it now. I get what I lost. And I'm sorry. I leaned back in my chair. You didn't lose anything, Calvin. You never had it to begin with. You can't lose respect you never earned. He nodded slowly. You're right. I know I'm right. He stood up. I won't bother you again. Good. He walked to the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, Elara's doing better. She got her own place. Started therapy. She's trying. I'm glad. She misses you. That's her problem. Not mine. He left without another word. Marcus sat down across from me. Feel better? No. Good. You shouldn't. I drove home in silence, thinking about Calvin, about Elara, about the choices people make and the consequences they refuse to see coming. When I got home, I opened the drawer where I'd put Elara's letter, read it again. Then I pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. The final meeting came 6 months after the first one. This time, it was just Marcus, me, and a notary. Last chance, Marcus said. You can still revoke the trust, change everything back. I don't want to. You sure? I'm sure. The notary stamped the final documents. The trust was now irrevocable, permanent, unchangeable. Everything I'd built, the house, the savings, the investments, would go to the scholarship fund if Elara didn't meet the conditions. And based on the past 6 months, she wouldn't. But that was okay. Because I'd learned something important. I'd learned that love without respect is just manipulation. That family isn't about obligation. It's about choice. And I'd made my choice. My phone buzzed. Another text from Elara. I'd started reading them again, though I still hadn't responded. Dad, I'm still trying. I hope you can see that. I typed back for the first time in 6 months. I see it. 3 dots appeared. Then, can we talk? I thought about it. About the drive, the door, the laugh. About the 6 months of silence and the slow, painful process of rebuilding something that should never have been broken in the first place. Not yet, I typed. But maybe soon. I hit send and set the phone down. Marcus was watching me. You going soft? No, just realistic. What's the difference? Soft means forgetting. Realistic means remembering but moving forward anyway. He nodded. Fair enough. I stood up, gathering my papers, the documents that proved I'd done exactly what I'd set out to do. I'd protected myself. I'd drawn boundaries. I'd made them understand that respect isn't optional. And I'd won. Marcus walked me to the door. What now? Now? I go back to work, back to my life, and I wait. For what? To see if she means it. I drove home through the city, past the familiar landmarks, past the university, past the life I'd built one careful decision at a time. When I got home, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. I walked inside, made coffee, and sat at my desk. The photograph of Elara at age 8 was still there, still smiling, still holding that pottery shard like it was treasure. I picked up the photo and looked at it for a long time. Then I set it back down and opened my laptop. There was work to do, artifacts to catalog, papers to write, a life to live. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.